last class we got to, our last video, we began discussing reasons why Keynes didn't believe in the classical assumptions. So we talked about price flexibility, and we discussed menu cost, and then we got to discussing wages with discussions on contracts, minimum wage laws, efficiency wages, and so that leaves us to discuss two of the classical assumptions. And in my eyes, this is the most important one. Interest rates are flexible. This may be a good time to go back to chapter 9 and see the discussion on Say's law. Remember that for Say's law to be true, interest rates must be flexible. For Say's law to be true, interest rates must be flexible. Because Say's law suggests that every dollar earned must be spent by someone. So if I save my money, it must end up being borrowed. For that to happen, wages or interest rates need to adjust so that somebody will always borrow the money. Okay? In other words, if the bank has a bunch of money on hand, they need to lower their interest rates so that people will borrow the money. Keynes doesn't necessarily agree with this. And here are some of the criticisms associated with this. One potential criticism is there may be no suitable borrowers. All right, so basically what could happen is, if this is our quantity of loanable funds, and this is our interest rate, and banks may choose, an interest rate here at 6%, where the bank is intentionally holding extra money. This is the quantity saved, and this is the quantity borrowed. The bank may realize that if it lowers its interest rates, it can find people that will borrow the money, but maybe it simply doesn't want to loan the money to those people. I think we all have friends that we don't want to loan money to, right? Banks may look out at its customers and say, there's nobody out here I want to loan money to. And so they may intentionally keep interest rates unaligned from the equilibrium. They may choose to hold on to extra money. This is so important because if the banks are holding on to extra money, Say's law cannot be true. And if Say's law is not true, then production is not the key aspect of the economy. All right, that's a lot to take in, but remember, the classical economists focus on production because production creates consumption. The logic behind that is every dollar that I produce in terms of my effort, every dollar I earn because of my work is going to be spent by someone, according to classical economists. But if this occurs, then that wouldn't be the case. Some of the money I earn is not spent. Therefore, my production is not necessarily determining consumption. So production may not be the key economic variable. Okay? This is why Keynes focused on aggregate demand, because he looked at this and said, wow, if people choose to save their money, that could be bad for the economy because it might not all get spent because some of the money stays in the bank. This is the key aspect of Keynesian economics. And in one of these other videos, I'll probably come back and talk about this again because it's so important that you understand it. Okay? So this is one reason. There may be no suitable borrowers. There may just not be anybody out there that wants to borrow the money. Second criticism. No, banks may need to hold some money. All right, a true equilibrium here would mean quantity of loanable funds, interest rates, savers, borrowers. If you're wondering why I keep redrawing these graphs, is because I think it helps you learn. Okay, if I just draw it once, you may forget it, but if you see it over and over again, it might help you retain that information. So this is really the same argument as the one we just saw. It's this same graph. Okay, maybe they set the interest rates above the equilibrium and intentionally hold some money. If the market really operated at equilibrium, that would mean every dollar the bank gets in savings, it loans out. If that were the case, how much money would be at the bank at any given moment? Zero. If the banks loaned out every single dollar that was saved there wouldn't ever be any money at the bank. Which means you go to the bank and you say, I'd like to withdraw $100. They would say, we don't have any money. That doesn't happen, right? It doesn't happen because banks choose to hold extra money. And if they choose to hold extra money, that means some of the money saved is not borrowed and spent. It's very important to understand that. There are other criticisms of why this might not be the case. There's still that favorite one that we talked about before. Maybe people are just stupid. Maybe the banks don't know what they're doing. Maybe they're lazy. That's always a possibility. But I'm just going to leave it here. Those are two pretty strong criticisms of why interest rates may not be flexible. And then the last assumption, this is the assumption that I added that wasn't in the book. The last assumption was that people are informed and make rational decisions. And Keynes simply just said, not necessarily. Maybe some do. Maybe most are informed and make rational decisions. But in reality, there are people out there that we know that don't. Keynes says that people exhibited animal spirits. Animal spirits. Basically, that people were unpredictable. And as a result, the economy was also unpredictable. So for example, if a lot of people start buying some pair of shoes, other people are going to start buying it too. And it may not be because they're consciously thinking this is a good decision, the benefits outweigh the cost, but they may just be buying it without really much thought, right? They may just be doing it because that's what they're going to do. People may just not do what you expect them to do. They may not be predictable. So rather than imagining, people responding to incentives and weighing their benefits and costs like the classical economists would imagine, Keynes basically viewed people as kind of like animals, very unpredictable. You don't know what they're going to do next, okay? And if you don't know what they're going to do next, then all the other assumptions also kind of look ridiculous. If prices are flexible, that means businesses need to know when to raise and lower prices. Keynes would say businesses are unpredictable, people are unpredictable. Maybe if you're supposed to lower prices, maybe if this is the scenario here and this is supply and demand, and here's our current price, classical economists would say the businesses would lower their prices to reach equilibrium. And that may happen. It probably would happen in most scenarios. But Keynes would say maybe sometimes it wouldn't. Maybe sometimes the businesses would just say, well, I refuse to lower my price. I'm going to keep it here. That could happen. Or maybe they decide to raise their price. Maybe they say, you know what, we're going to raise the price and just see what happens. It's possible, right? It's possible that businesses could do this. And maybe if they raise the price, maybe customers think, wow, that price went up. That must be a really good product. If they're charging more for it now, it must be a better product than I realized. Basically, he just doesn't think people are predictable. So he disagreed with all of the classical assumptions, which has key implications on the future models that we're going to talk about. So what we did today is discuss the classical economic assumptions and why Keynes disagrees with them. In the next video, we'll start getting into Keynes's actual models.